everyone, and welcome back to a 20 something survival guide. I'm Darian Alexis, your host, and this is the podcast where we learn to survive and thrive in our 20s. Our topic today does affect everyone. So, whether you're 15, 75, 30, or somewhere in between, this episode is for you. And so, in a world dominated by the buzz of social media and our phones constantly lighting up all the time to keep us tuned in, we find ourselves trapped in that web of digital connectedness, whether we want to be or not. So, in our episode today, I brought along a very special guest that knows a thing or two about the little world inside our phones. She is one of my personal favorite fashion and lifestyle content creators and influencers, as well as the host of Rosey Day podcast, Rosey Sera. So, thank you so much for joining me, Rosey.
Thank you so much for having me, Darian. It's such an honor just to be able to actually connect with you in person, even though it's a little bit more of a virtual element to it. But it's nice to, have a chat and dive into this topic. I'm so excited to, talk about digital detox today.
Yeah, absolutely. And did you want to introduce yourself a little bit further to the Surviving and Thriving Club before we hop in?
Sure. I mean, you gave me a pretty amazing intro, so thank you for that. Honestly, I'm Rosey Sera, content creator, influencer. I focus a lot around fashion and lifestyle. I also host my podcast called Rosey Days. If you want to check that out, we dive into self-development and just all the fun topics that us as 20 somethings or maybe 30 somethings navigate in life. Feel free to tune in. That's kind of I was telling Darian earlier, my little Hannah Montana lifestyle. I mostly focus on content creation, influencing, and podcasting, but I also have a corporate job. I'm a corporate girly. So I'm a marketing manager for a tech startup. So that's a little bit about me.
No, that's awesome. You are so inspiring. And for all you listeners, I will add Rosie's information in the show notes. So please do go check her out. I also wanted to ask you, how long have you been a creator for? Or consider yourself a creator?
Yeah. So I consider myself starting kind of towards the end of high school. So that was probably around 2013, 2014 is kind of when I started taking things seriously, doing some modeling on the side. It's always been more of a hobby. And once I, went into college, did a little bit more content creation then as well, but really kind of focused based on more of the social expectations of navigating life, focusing on your profession and your career was my main priority during that time. So it was always kind of a little bit of both of worlds until I really dove into kind of the business aspect of things earlier last year, 2023, and kind of saw things flourish. And I honestly don't know why I didn't take it more seriously earlier on, but I was focusing on my career. So, everything has been, a journey of its own, but grateful to be here today. And it's been about, I think, a little over 10 years now. So it's been a slow and steady growth, but an exciting one for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it's been 10 years of you focusing on social and content creation, but how long have you actually been using social platforms? Did that start before high school?
Yes. So if you are, 20 somethings, you might be familiar with MySpace.
Yeah.
So yeah. The audience is probably familiar with MySpace. So that's kind of where I kicked things off with my social, connections in social media world. I think I remember just doing some like coding and setting up my profile and setting up my top 3 lists and the music and all the things. So it started way back in the day. So really kind of in the depths of what social media meant and really having that building that persona for yourself and your quote unquote personal brand started way back.
Yeah, no,
What
definitely.
about you? Did you have a MySpace or anything like that?
I never had a MySpace. I was actually not allowed to be on social till a lot later than most people. My parents kind of monitored us. I feel like I did start on YouTube though. So me and my friends would make YouTube
Ooh.
videos when I was like 7, but most of them
Oh,
were like uploaded on private.
yeah.
So that's kind of where I got my start on social. And I really wish that I kept up with it because maybe I could have, gone somewhere. But I definitely was one of those people too embarrassed to embrace my authentic self back then.
Mhm.
So most of the videos stayed on private, but that's where I spent
Yeah.
most of my time. And I was also like a Tumblr girl. Like I
Oh, love
used
that. I could
that.
see you being yeah, I love that. Yeah, I also had a lot of drafts up in my YouTube, so I think that's just kind of the nature of getting started, and I loved Tumblr. I think it was like I don't even know, it was like the Pinterest of nowadays, I
Yes,
feel
I
like.
was
It
going to
was, like,
say
full
that.
aesthetic.
Oh, because we've both been on social for so long and so have a ton of the listeners, I figured in order to start this section of the podcast, we talk a little bit about what a digital detox is. So, a digital detox is a
Mhm.
period of time when a person voluntarily refrains from using digital devices like your smartphone, computers, social media platforms. I think most of the time when we think of a digital detox, it might just be staying off the apps. I think most of us are still texting our friends and loved ones. However, I feel like there's different degrees to it. So, Rosie, how would you define a digital detox for yourself?
Yeah, so I think for me, digital detox is like fully being present and completely cutting out technology. So, like TV, um, work, laptop, phone, all of the things is having a full digital detox. So, like anything that is like toxic to my being present, I cut out.
Hmm.
So, that's kind of what I would consider having that digital detox.
Yeah, absolutely. And can you
Mhm.
share a personal experience with the listeners when you felt you needed one of these digital detoxes and what promoted you to take a step back?
Yeah. So, as you know, as a content creator, you find yourself having to be very present on social media, be very active, not only through DMs, engagement, and posting, of course, but also ensuring that you are across all of the platforms and you can't miss a beat and all the things. And honestly, that feels very overwhelming, especially if you're not used to it and you haven't built a system for yourself. And so, kind of towards last year in the beginning where I was like, okay, I'm going to take this seriously. What is going to be my strategy and kind of how I want to move forward with this? I kind of found myself constantly kind of going back to the same app and just like,
Yeah.
going through apps and not really finding anything new. And I'm just like, okay, that is kind of a trigger there. And then another thing is just like endless scrolling where I'm just like, kind of going through and not getting anything in return for the energy that I'm inputting into it. So when I find myself in that type of scenario and that type of circumstance, I realize that I'm not only doom scrolling and really wasting a lot of my energy in that, but also it's like I'm missing out on being present, being here in the moment. And this is really what it's all about is like enjoying kind of where I am.
Hmm.
And as content creators, there's a lot of putting a lot of content out and doing all this stuff, but being able to let go and being present and just kind of close that whenever you're ready instead of kind of going back to the apps or going back to the devices or going back to, scrolling, doom scrolling. I realized like, okay, I need to like this is not good for me. I noticed that I'm catching myself in this like lower vibe, lower kind of negative energy. The internal dialogue is not the greatest when I find myself in this space. So that's when I'm like, okay, I'm going to step back. I'm going to close the apps. I'm going to kind of refrain from being on socials or being on my phone or watching TV or something that's like not very productive for me or my energy, and stay present, reevaluate what is beneficial and what is not, and kind of move forward from there.
Yeah. And how many times do you feel like you've taken part in a digital detox? Because I know I personally have not s-
Hmm.
done them as much as I should be. So is that something that you
Yeah,
feel like you have
same.
found more recently? Or is that something that you
Uh-huh.
kind of like schedule them out? Or
Yeah, I wish I was as structured as that, but I'm not. Honestly, like, because the pressure and that like procrastinator in me kind of gives is that fuel for me to
Mhm.
be active on social and like motivates me to an extent, that I don't really do a lot of digital detox like others do. I feel
Mm,
like for
mhm.
me, when I have a digital detox, it's mostly maybe like a day or something like that, or maybe like
Yeah,
a
me too.
weekend, but not really, you know? And haven't been as intentional of creating that digital detox structure for myself, because I know people that will just be like, okay, well, I'm going to delete my apps. I'm going
Yes.
to like not be on socials and like all this stuff. And I'm like, I feel like I'm going to miss out. I don't know. There's like a FOMO element to it. And I'm like, okay, but I have so much to do and all the things, like all my things I have to get scheduled. And so I'm not as intentional as um, building that digital detox schedule for me, where I'm like, okay, this weekend I'm just gonna like do like a full put my phone in a safe station and like go on a vacation or something, because so much revolves around being on social media for me, even
Yeah.
just like my actual personal job. But I think I think I could be better. That's for sure.
I agree with you completely. I feel like I have not been as intentional as I should be with digital detox. And I was actually speaking with my coworker the other day because we both work on social for the university that I work at. And she's like, yeah, because we work on social so much for our jobs for
Hmm.
break, I just set my phone aside and I did not go on my phone for an entire week. And I was like, oof, an entire week? Because
That's
for me,
tough.
oh, yes, it's a holiday break. As a content creator on top of the full time job, this week is my week that I can grind because I had an uninterrupted week. I wanted to use that time to create content, you know?
Hmm.
So I think it is a little bit trickier for the content creators of the world to find that time. Do you think a strategy could be to schedule it out in the future? At least for myself, I think I might try that. Do you believe that excessive uses of social media impacts our mental well-being and emotional well-being?
Yeah, 1000%. So it's like a two-parter question. First, I think it's a
Mhm.
matter of figuring out what you are feeding yourself with and what is your algorithm feeding you on a day to day in your social media platforms. So if you have, a positive, empowering, you know, funny or whatever type of content that you like to consume, then it might impact it in a positive way and might impact your
Mhm.
mental and emotional well-being in a positive way. But if you are following other people that you find yourself, comparing yourself to, you feel inadequate, you feel some sort of anxiety against that particular page that you're following or that particular person or whatever, then it definitely will impact your mental health and well-being. I think it's just part of being on social media, recognizing that a lot of it is the highlights reel, a lot of it is kind of showcasing the positive elements of life. And I think a lot of creators have been very transparent about it. I think
Mhm.
there is room for improvement, as there is in all areas of life. But I think that, using so much, digital content or consuming so much of it, it could potentially negatively impact your mental and emotional well-being. I mean, I think just being in front of a screen for so long, whether
Mhm.
it's on your phone or a laptop or a TV, I think that there has to be a human connection and a level of human interaction so you don't feel so alone and disconnected. I think that having an excessive use of social media can kind of negatively impact, but it also depends on kind of what your algorithm is showing you and what you are consuming on a day to day.
Yeah, I really appreciate that you wanted to call out the positive impacts as well, because a lot of the time people will be like, oh, social media is so bad, it's evil, but there are some positive
Hmm.
aspects, and we can kind of curate who we're following to bring some of those more positive lights into our lives. I think it also depends on what apps we're using. For me personally, I compare myself a lot on Instagram to other creators I'm following. On TikTok,
Mhm.
like you said, the algorithm, my For You page is so different that I'm like going on
Yeah.
there, I'm laughing, I'm learning things. So I think that because of that, if you are someone that is experiencing the negative impacts, you can detox from just an app, or just even unfollow the people that might be making you feel bad about yourself and feeding into that negative side of social media. What do you think are some signs that someone might be experiencing the more negative sides of this digital overload? And how do you think people can realize when they need to take a break?
Well, I completely agree with you on having to switch on the apps depending on
Mhm.
what really gives you that positive kind of reinforcement and that more optimistic outlook. I think you're so right. On Instagram, there's a little bit more of that
Curated sense.
comparison,
Yeah.
curated sense, that type of vibe. And then TikTok is just like a free for all. Everyone's very authentic, and there's really not that like kind of filter, if that makes sense. Everyone's very open and accepting, I guess.
Mhm.
Because I think it might be just like a newer platform, especially when it kind of started developing towards the pandemic where everyone was like very
Definitely.
vulnerable and open and like really wanting to connect. But I think when it comes to kind of overloading on digital content or experiencing digital overload, I think recognizing and being very self aware on whether you are literally in a doom scrolling hole and you haven't had any water, you haven't had any food, your eyes are like red or your eyes are dry. um, I think that like when you are experiencing any difficulty concentrating because you kind of want to go back and open your phone real quick just to see what's new on the feed. Whenever you are scrolling, if you're noticing that your heart rate's up a little bit and you're noticing your
Mhm.
anxiety boosted a little bit or your stress levels boosted, I think it's just being very self-aware on kind of what is happening internally and really in your body and being in your body and experiencing that instead of just like in your mind of like, oh, this is giving me the dopamine that I need. And like,
Mhm.
this is giving me the like immediate satisfaction instead of I actually haven't eaten in like 3 hours and whatever. So I think those are important signs. And then sleep patterns, which I can relate 1000%. I find myself, kind of more of a night owl
Mm.
realm, but
Mhm.
I find myself, going in on my screen. It doesn't necessarily have to be social media. It doesn't necessarily have to be anything like that. But, nighttime hours, having a nighttime routine and not having a screen to your face at, right before bedtime, I find myself not sleeping very well, and then that affects the next day. I actually got an Aura ring that like tells me, okay, it's time to wind down. This is your sleep score. Like you have to be very regimented and strategic about your morning and nighttime routine. So I think it's like being very present, being in your body, and kind of recognizing, being very self-aware on like, okay, this is what's happening. This is the reality. I'm doom scrolling. It's not making me feel good, and it's time to put it away.
I agree. There are some outside factors you can use. Like you said, the Oura Ring. I use my
Mm-hmm.
Apple Watch. I
Yeah.
definitely use my screen time. I turn on screen time limits. But more than anything, my partner, my boyfriend will be like, Darian, you have been on that phone for a
Same.
long time. Maybe it's time for us to go for a walk. Maybe it's time to read a book. He is so
Yeah.
good at keeping me in check, and I really appreciate that in him as a partner. So
Yeah.
any of the outside factors you can use to help you and figure out, what is too much, definitely look
Mm-hmm.
into that and reflect. And definitely use
Yeah.
your partners and friends if you can to hold you accountable.
1000%. I think having a good support system and recognizing, I think like once is you recognize that it's like, okay, I need to take a break, or maybe you don't really realize that you're in it for so long. I mean, same here. My husband Ty, he's like, okay, you've been on the phone for a long time. Like, let's take a break. Like, have you seen the sun? Have you
Yeah,
gone
have you seen the
outside?
sun?
Yeah. So yeah, shout out to the real ones for checking in on us.
No, seriously, sometimes I just need to be told, and that's okay too.
Same. Yeah.
So you were talking a little bit about like your sleep schedule
Hmm.
and things that are kind of impacted by your doom scrolling or just being on social a lot.
Hmm.
In your opinions, what have been the key benefits from you from detoxing when you have done a
Yeah.
detox?
No, for sure. I think, the overall well-being, mentally, physically, like spiritually, honestly, like I think that there are benefits to having a digital detox, whether it's a freaking half a day, or
Yeah.
an hour or
Yeah,
whatever.
even just an hour.
Okay, there's always just a benefit of you're present. You feel more clarity, you feel more focused, you feel more intentional about kind of where you want to go, especially as a content creator too. Like the more breaks you take, the more you're a little bit, you have more space. You create more space for you to be more creative. You
Mhm.
create more space for you to be a little bit more intentional and more authentic instead of comparing yourself or finding yourself a little bit more introverted. I think when I have that digital detox, I find myself calling a friend or going to visit my family or having a great conversation with my significant other or going for a walk with my pup. And
Yeah.
it kind of enhances those real world connections, and it just kind of fosters a healthier, more balanced lifestyle, in my opinion. Just kind of like disconnecting to reconnect is 1000% a benefit.
Oh, I
Yeah.
love that. Disconnecting to reconnect. That's beautiful. I'm going to use that
Ah,
one.
do it.
And so I love how you framed everything. Do you have any
Mhm.
strategies for people to learn how to disconnect to reconnect?
Yeah. Well, I think for me, it's like, okay, I'm self aware. I am realizing that, maybe it's a little self sabotage where I'm like, okay, I know that I'm doom scrolling and I know that this is giving me the immediate satisfaction that I want or immediate kind of external validation that I want from this social media device, tech device or whatever. But I think strategy wise on, realizing it's time to detox, it's time to step away from the phone. I'm going to have the willpower and I'm willing to go ahead and shut it down, put it away, put it to charge, whatever. Maybe let people know so they are not looking for you and
Mhm.
thinking you went missing. But I think it's a matter of like, setting it down and then being intentional with that extra time that you have and building that like special moment that you can connect with yourself and say you want to journal. I like to use it's actually right next to my nightstand, my 6-minute diary. Read a book, really kind of figure out what you like to do with your alone time. Maybe you want to go grab, I don't know, coffee or
Mhm.
uh, lunch by yourself, and seeing kind of what that date looks like for yourself without being connected and attached to your phone. Because I feel like for me, and this is like, I'm giving myself advice, honestly, because I can find myself kind of hiding behind my screen. And even in the real experience in this world, I find myself like, okay, I don't know, I get a little anxious entering the elevator and like doing the little small talk thing. And I'm like, I'm
Yeah.
just going to be on my phone. But okay, everyone is like you and me, and they probably just want to say hi and wish you that you have a good day, or maybe not, whatever. Maybe they just want
Yeah.
to stand in silence. I don't know. But I think just kind of figuring that out for yourself and not being so, anxious or scared about what the real world experience has to offer for you. It might be better than what's on the tech world. So,
No, definitely. I agree. Some wonderful strategies to help you get off the phone more is coming up with some hobbies. I have a friend and she started to knit. Whenever she's like,
ooh,
instead of going on my phone, whenever I get that urge to go on the phone, I'm gonna knit. And I was
mm-hmm.
like, that is so cool. So I love that unique hobbies like knitting are coming back. I love
Oh, I love
puzzling. It's like
that.
it
Yeah.
makes you be patient. It makes you get off the phone. It makes you get off the computer, iPad, whatever you're on. And it does allow
Mm-hmm.
for reconnecting because It's so much better to do a puzzle with a companion than by yourself
Right.
because they can be tricky. Another
Yeah.
thing that I feel like I personally implement as a strategy is being off of my phone after a certain time every single night. So, unlike you, I'm a
Yeah.
morning person. I go to bed very early. So, I'm pretty much off my phone by 7 or 8 p.m. every night so I can
Nice.
focus on, reading a book, journaling, connecting with my partner, anything that can just get me off the phone, even just for a little bit longer, because I find myself
Mhm.
in front of the screen a lot myself. So I think these are all really great strategies for people to help them implement that digital detox into their everyday life.
Yes, I love that. I'm
And
gonna try knitting and puzzling. I feel like that sounds like a good time.
yeah, you should start with a smaller puzzle because I feel like bigger
Yeah.
puzzles are super overwhelming. So start with
Yeah.
something that's smaller and build your way up.
I will,
That's
I will. I feel like just, like, teeny tiny microscopic puzzle pieces already sounds anxiety inducing, so I'm gonna take your advice on that.
definitely. And I feel like there's other hobbies too that I think a lot of people haven't really taken advantage of that they used to, like
Uh-huh.
cooking homemade bread, baking, sewing. My friends learning how to sew. I'm like, that's such a cool goal because
I
you're
love
still
that.
learning something. You can make cool clothes, which you can use for your blog later on if you want to. But
Exactly.
still, it is getting you off the phone, getting you in front of the world instead of the world behind the screen. As a content creator, how do you manage the pressure to constantly produce and stay engaged online without experiencing burnout? So I know you kind of mentioned this, but is there
Mhm.
anything you want to add to that to all the content creators listening?
Yeah, to all my content girlies, I think, I'm still trying to figure it out myself. I feel like everyone is still trying to figure everything
Hmm.
out. I
Definitely.
don't think anyone really has it sorted, unless they have like a management agency or something. But I
Yeah.
think for me, to manage the pressure of constantly being on socials, I think it's a matter of like setting clear boundaries for myself on like, okay, when am I going to be on whichever platform? What am I actually going to be intentional about? Am I going
Hmm.
to go ahead and check my DMs, kind of break down the to-dos for each platform and for kind of each delegated tasks, I guess. So setting clear boundaries of like, okay, this is the time that I'm going to do it. I'm going to stick with it. And then scheduling those breaks out throughout the week. As a content creator right now that I'm doing it part time, but hopefully full time soon, it's a matter of like, okay, what are my priorities? When am I going to put those in for social media so I don't feel overwhelmed, and breaking those out into smaller pieces because it can feel so overwhelming, especially when you have so many kind of commitments and requirements on these are however many posts you have to post per brand deal, or these are how many things that you have to do. So figuring out, okay, which day am I going to do content create or batch content creation? Which day
Hmm.
am I going to check the DMs? Which day am I going to post and create the actual captions? Because that's already a thing. Which day am I going to check my emails and respond to, brand requests? So really it's just figuring out like when you want to schedule that out for yourself, so you break those big kind of overwhelming tasks into small bite-sized pieces. And then if there's any way for you to be able to delegate certain tasks, so like, I don't know, say if there's a way that you can have another content creator help you shoot some content so you don't feel like you have to haul you and your tripod around for hours, which takes way longer. Figuring out how to do that. And then finally, I think it's like once you establish and build your community in your platform, they're going to be understanding and supportive about when you need to take a break, or say if you don't post on that particular day. Like for Rosy Days, I was navigating a lot of change for my podcast and moving to a different state and starting a new job in my corporate girl, side of life, I think it was, okay, I need to kind of prioritize that part first, and then I'll come to my podcast later. But my community is still there and very supportive and engaging. So I think it's, once you build that community, they're going to be supportive of you no matter the stage, no matter kind of where you are in that point of life. So if you feel burnt out, reach out, let them know that you need a break. And then just be intentional about kind of where you want to set your time so it doesn't feel as overwhelming and you don't get burnt out.
No, that's amazing, and I'm so glad you have these boundaries for yourself because I feel like I don't. I feel like
Mhm.
a lot of times I'm just listening to the ding of my phone, like immediately when I get a DM
Mm.
responding, immediately when I get an email responding. And so
Yeah.
I think it would be so much better for my mental health and mental
Mhm.
well-being and my future as a creator if I did
Yeah.
set boundaries and scheduled things like actually thought about when to respond to DMs instead of doing it immediately. So I'm so glad that you mentioned that and I'm taking
Yeah.
notes. So
Yay. That's good. I'm taking notes from you too. So
I
we're
know I'm
helping
like
each other
writing
out.
down my notes as you're speaking. I'm like, oh, I'm going to implement that
Ah.
one.
Good. I love that. I think also another thing is, or at least for myself, and this has just been like in general because I feel like it brings a lot of stress for me, is
hmm
notifications. Like I
Yes.
don't have any notifications on any of my things except
Oh
for
my
my
gosh.
emails.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I can't. I can't.
That's
Especially
so
if you have the
funny.
Apple Watch, like I can't even
Oh my
imagine.
goodness. No, they're all turned off on my watch for
Oh, good.
sure. And
Yeah.
I turned off all my TikTok notifications and I turned off most of my like notifications. But for now, I do still have my message and email
Uh-huh.
notifications on which is where I feel like I'm getting a lot of the, oh, someone DM me, someone's asking me a question, someone wants to interact. And I'm like, okay, I'm coming. But
Right.
sometimes that's just not the best for my mental health. Even if I took an hour a day to respond to DMs opposed to having my notifications on, even setting
Yeah.
that small boundary, I feel like would make a huge difference. So, thank you for
Big
giving me
time.
that idea because your girl is about to be making some schedules after this call.
Hey, let's go. I love to hear it.
And so, you've been talking a lot about being mindful while on social media.
Mhm.
So, do you have any other tips other than anything that you've mentioned for maintaining a healthy relationship on the platforms? And this can go for anyone, whether you're a creator or not.
Ooh, that's a good question. I think from my experience, being authentic and being very honest of kind of where you are, is important. And this is also advice that I'm giving to myself and listening to myself in the moment because, I've navigated a lot of change and I feel like I've been very kind of quiet and introspective about it, that I haven't
Mhm.
been vulnerable and honest and shared kind of what I'm going through, that I feel like a lot of others can benefit from and learn from
Mm, mhm.
while I'm navigating it and figuring out and so I think it's being mindful while being on social media of like, okay, first of all, the content that you're consuming, but also as a creator, what are you pushing out? What is it that is benefiting you that can benefit others? Is something that I like wholeheartedly believe and support. And whether it's funny meme or whether it's something like a motivational quote and it might be a little chuggy or whatever, but I like to share it with people because I mean, it depends on your audience, obviously, but I lean more on the self development, growth mindset and positive type of point of view of life on my social platforms and on my podcast, that like that's what how I want to show up, not only as a creator but also as a consumer of that type of content. So like as an end user, I think of my audience as like different versions of myself of like, how can I help them? How can I help them navigate these certain aspects of life? So being mindful as a creator on what you want to push out. And I think as a consumer on what you're actually putting into your mind and your eyes.
No, definitely. And I love the motivational quotes. I try to share those too. And
Hey,
I love when I see them
yes.
on other people's stories. I don't think it's chuggy. I think it's
Okay, good. That
always,
makes me feel better.
I always think it's a pick me up to my day. And I always love resharing that kind of stuff, whether it's a reel, whether it's just a quote. I think having positive content and sharing positive content with others is a great way to uplift the people in our communities and our different rings on the social platforms. Um,
Mhm.
that being said, too, I think another way to maintain a healthy relationship with the platforms is just being mindful, like about who you're following and how you're interacting with them. I love when people comment nice things to me, and it really does make my day. So, like being able to do that with other people, like if I'm seeing someone post something and I love their shoes, I'm going to tell them that I love their shoes because I
Yes, I
feel like
love
with
that.
with Instagram specifically, something that has had me not have the most healthy relationship with the platform recently is I feel like I have a lot of ghost followers, if that makes sense.
Same.
Maybe people that
Mhm.
like are from high school that are just kind of lurking. And then I'm like
Yes.
overthinking what I'm posting for the people that care. But why are these people viewing my stuff? They're not
Mhm.
interacting. It just makes me feel not the best. So just kind of being mindful about that and kind of changing my perception on it or even removing them as a follower to help me feel better with the platform and the content that I'm posting into the world.
No, that is I'm so glad that you mentioned that because honestly, that is so huge, particularly on Instagram for myself. I feel like maybe that's why we feel the way we do about the certain platforms. It's because TikTok is
Yeah.
very open and accepting, but Instagram, it's like you have those ghost followers from like way back in the day and they're just like lurking and looking at your stuff and
Yeah.
like not engaging in any way. They're just looking. And I'm like, what are you doing? You know, but you
Yeah.
can't let that stop you as a creator because as you can see there's people that are find inspiration in you and really find you to be that creator that they love to follow and you inspire them and you can't let that stop you. You can't let the haters or whatever stop you from being your authentic self. And as we go into our 20s and navigate different changes of life, like you're going to be a different person from what they remember and who they think you are. And so really showing the fuck up of like, okay, no, like this is me now and I'm loving it and I have a wonderful community that supports me. And if you're not here for it, bye. Like peace out.
Definitely. And I feel like I have made so many meaningful connections with people that I've met online, opposed to some of the
Yes.
people that I've like known in person. And it's like crazy to
Hmm.
think like, oh, I just met Rosie on this random app and now I'm like
Yeah.
seeing all of her content and it's making me happy and it's making me feel good. Whereas I knew this
Same.
girl from high school and everything she does kind of makes me feel bad. So I do think that being online can have really positive outcomes as well. So I wanted to ask you,
Yeah.
do you believe that the advancements we've had in technology can facilitate these meaningful connections? Or do you think that most of the people you have interacted with have been more superficial online?
No, I think I'm with you on this one. I think that, depending on what you are consuming and who you are interacting with, like I have
Hmm.
found a wealth of connections and people that, have a very similar mindset and point of view of life that I feel like we're like besties on social. I've never met them. And I
Yeah.
can't wait for the day that I do because it's just like we are literal best friends. Like we just connect in so many levels that it would have never been possible if we didn't have technology. So I think it definitely facilitates meaningful connections, meaningful conversations like the one that we're having. And it definitely contributes to having relationships and friendships that could last lifetimes. So I think on the other side of things, there are going to be people that are superficial and
Yeah.
will have superficial interactions and will not walk the talk and have those like, oh yeah, we'll hang out or whatever, and it never happens, or yeah, we'll talk, or here, yeah, I'll give you my number, and it never happens. So I think that it's just part of it, but there's a much bigger weight on the positive element of having that meaningful connection, and that person on the other side that resonates with you and you resonate with them, and you guys are like pen pals pretty much.
No, I couldn't agree more. And on the last episode of the podcast, me and my guest talked about how to make friends. And we really
Mhm.
emphasized in that episode too, like how strong of a tool social media can be for that. Because you have
Mhm.
a chance to meet people that you wouldn't have met otherwise. So I think that's wonderful.
Yeah.
But on the opposite end of that, because online interactions and being connected is so common, how do you
Mhm.
think that individuals or even the listeners tuning in today can actively build and strengthen their offline connections?
That's a good question. So for peeps that are wanting to build offline connections, like, okay, so for me, I found pickleball to be something that is very
Mm,
offline, and you can have a meaningful interaction when you're like playing or whatever. You can play doubles and stuff like that. So that has been helpful. But I think there could be an online element to it if you want, where
hmm
you can join groups and all the things. But if you want to create offline connections, you can go to local events. You can, find a hobby that kind of forces you to do a little bit more of a community engagement type of thing, where you can meet people that are like-minded and like want to do things that you like to do. You can go, I have ClassPass, which is, I love ClassPass. It's an app where you can kind of sign up and go to different like workout studios and do all the things at a like fraction of the price. So ClassPass is amazing. I go to Pilates, I go to yoga, I go to, cycle classes or whatever. And I meet people that are into that same workout, and, maybe grab a coffee after if you really have that connection. So I think like if you're trying to build offline connections, those things could be very, very beneficial and very helpful. Um, and I think also spending quality time with those that you love. It could
hmm
be your family, it could be your created family, it could be your friends, it could be coworkers that you vibe with or whatever. So I think spending quality time with those that you love and strengthening those relationships as well is always very beneficial for offline interactions and offline connections. So um, yeah, those are kind of my 2 cents, or I guess 3 cents.
No, that's awesome. And I would say too, like, I want to challenge you listeners a step further. You can take your online friendships offline, schedule time to hang out, schedule time to
Yes.
interact, schedule time to go on a little trip or go visit each other's hometown if you're not in the same state. So
Yeah.
I know that's a little difficult. It might be a little scary, but it can be really beautiful. One of my best friends, she was also a Tumblr girl, and she met another girl on Tumblr.
I
And
love
ever
it.
since, they've maintained their friendship and have taken turns visiting each other's states. So I think that's really
Oh,
awesome that
that's
they have been
precious. I
able to.
love it.
Yeah, I know. Just taking that online friendship offline too is a great way to connect with others. Um,
1000%.
and then my last question for you today is talking about setting boundaries, which we know that you're good at because you've already given us a tip or two
Kind of.
there.
Kind of.
Well, the last question is, what advice do you have for setting healthy boundaries with technology, especially in a world where constant connectivity is often expected?
Yeah, of course. Okay, so we talked about having kind of periods throughout your day or your
Mm-hmm.
week where you want to unplug and you want to be very intentional about it. Boom, there's that. We talked about the notifications, like that is such a
Yep.
trigger for me. Like that's too much. I can't. So boom, check that off. I think we also talked about, communicating with your friends and your family that you're gonna kind of be offline for a little bit. Check that off. I think that's very important. And then another thing that I actually wanted to add to this last point is kind of creating like a tech-free zone in your home.
Mm.
Like, and I can definitely be more intentional about this, but in your bedroom, like I don't have a TV in my bedroom. Like that is just not, like I'm not willing
I
to have a
totally
TV.
do.
That's okay though. That's just how everyone has their own thing. But I did for a while, and then I was like, I'm not even watching TV in here. Like
Yeah.
If not, I know that I'm gonna have that thing on and binge watch TV or
Mm.
Netflix or, like whatever, until the wee hours of the night. And I just like have to set that boundary for myself, because if not, I know my ass is gonna be watching TV for the end of time. Or like YouTube videos or whatever. So I think that is important. So like having any particular like zones in your home or in your room or whatever, where you're like, okay, no tech, no phones. We're gonna like kind of disconnect and be present.
Mm-hmm. I want to add to that a little bit too, because even if it isn't a no tech zone per se, something that
Mm-hmm.
me and Michael do is like no tech during dinner, like during meals. Like
Oh,
think about it like
yes.
growing up,
That's
some people be
perfect.
like, no phones at the dinner table. So we're
That's
trying to
perfect. I love that.
re-implement that because I know it's been a struggle point for us because Michael, as I've already said, keeps me in check. And so I just try to be more present with him when we're spending time together because now that we're living together, it doesn't mean that we get to spend all of our time together because we still have our own hobbies, our own friends, our own jobs. So that time is
Yes, love it.
still special and still valuable. So anytime you can add in, no tech at dinner, maybe no tech in the morning first thing, whatever
Mm-hmm.
you can do to set some boundaries, I think is beautiful.
Yes, I love that. I love the no tech in the morning. That's a big one.
Yeah, I didn't realize I was like doing some research and apparently it's like really not good for your anxiety if you're on your phone first thing in the morning, which
Mm-hmm.
I guess it makes sense, but I never thought about it much. So that's definitely one that I'm trying to bring back because I am totally the person that rolls over, looks at all of her notifications first thing.
Oh,
So I'm trying to get rid of that growth in 2024. But the first
a
step is just acknowledgement. So
okay.
we're
One
at
bite
least
at a
there.
time. Yeah, no, I get that. Same. I need to do it for nighttime. Like no nighttime tech. So,
I go to bed so early that it's like night times, whatever. And I do fall
oh, I
asleep.
love that.
I fall asleep to movies every night, which is the only reason I have a TV. But I have the sleep timer on, so I only set it for 20 minutes. So if it goes off, then I'm just laying in bed, like looking at the ceiling if I'm still
Yeah,
awake. But most of the time, I'm asleep by the end of my 20-minute timer, which I don't know why my body works that way. I never
that's so
used
good
to.
though. To have that nighttime routine on point like that is goals.
Yeah, and I definitely think it comes from those boundaries that I was setting with like no phone after a certain amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
I guess TV kind of affects me a little different, still tech, but whatever works for
Yeah,
you, whatever works for me.
exactly.
That's how we're
Exactly.
rocking with it. That's how we're rolling with it. But as we conclude our episode today, we delved into so many different intricate parts of balancing our digital connectivity and life beyond our phones and beyond social media. So, thank you so much, Rosie, for joining. I've loved this
Yes,
conversation. It's been so great getting to connect with you kind of offline ish,
I
our
know.
first
Yes,
face to
me
face
too.
chat. But before we get going completely, there is
Mhm.
one question that I'm going to start asking all of the guests. And that is what is one piece of advice or words of inspiration that you want to leave the 20 somethings with before you go today?
Oof, I love this. I wish I had your podcast when I was in my early 20s, honestly, because
That's why I created it.
yeah, I'm in my last year of my 20s, so little tear, but I feel like I'm like 23, so it's okay.
It's 23.
um yeah. But anyway, so I think so my advice for all my 20 somethings in this world that are tuning in to my wonderful friends podcast, I would say, my 20s or our 20s usually is a lot of, a series of adventures, lessons, a lot of self-discovery, a lot of self-awareness. And I just want to reiterate that it's okay to not have it all figured out. I think that our 20s are meant for us to take risks, learn from
Mm-hmm.
failures, and celebrate all of the victories, no matter how big or small. I think trusting the process is very important. Giving yourself grace as you're learning these lessons and going through adventures and discovering yourself is important. And remembering that a lot of self development and growth often happens outside of our comfort zone, and going out there and experiencing new things and putting down the digital connection and being present could be one of the things that might be out of your comfort zone. But really, your 20s is meant as a foundation for an amazing future. So, savor the moment and don't take everything too seriously because
For sure.
literally no one has a clue what the fuck is going on. So, have fun, enjoy
No,
it.
absolutely. If anyone takes anything away from this podcast episode, it is those words that you just said, because that is the whole purpose of this podcast. I wish when I turned 20, I
Yes.
had something like this, because as I've
Yeah.
said before, I've been fumbling through my 20s. I'm 25, so I'm only like halfway to 30, but
Yeah.
still, I still have so much learning to do. And so thank you so much for sharing those words, because
Of
I
course.
think they're inspiring. I hope the listeners
Oh,
can take them with them on their days. And I really
same.
hope that everything that me and Rosie have been talking about today has resonated with the listeners. So, whether you're a content creator like us or an individual just craving a healthier relationship, I hope some of the wisdom we shared helps guide you on your journeys. Rosie, I wanted to say thank you so much again.
Thank you.
Everyone, check her out. I am putting her information in the show notes. And thank you all for tuning in. Your support means the world to me. And every time you tune in, it just helps me provide some lessons to you. It helps us grow this community, and it helps people share their stories. And that's what I want to do. I want to help people share their unique journeys, and just, we're all going through different things, but in a similar way. So if we can be vulnerable here, I think that's really wonderful. If you have any feedback, please let me know. If you enjoyed the episode today, please subscribe, leave a review, share your thoughts on social with us at Darian Diaries. And in our next episode, we're going to keep the theme of well being going with an episode dedicated to well being tips for adults. So I hope you all have a great day. And as always, I'm Darian Alexis, and don't forget to survive and thrive.